Every time a government prints money, there is a hidden rule that decides who gets richer and who gets poorer. It is called the Cantillon Effect. And I genuinely cannot believe this is not taught in a single personal finance class anywhere on the planet. Because once you understand it, every financial decision the government makes suddenly looks completely different. Here is how it works. When new money enters the system, the people closest to the source, the banks, the government, large institutional asset holders, they get to spend it first. Before prices adjust, before inflation kicks in, by the time that freshly printed money trickles down to your paycheck and your savings account, the cost of everything you need to buy has already gone up. So the purchasing power does not just disappear, it transfers upward, not by accident, by structure, by math. And right now, this mechanism is running at a scale that is genuinely staggering. US government debt has crossed $38.8 trillion. Annual interest payments alone are approaching $1 trillion. To put that in perspective, over 25% of all federal revenue in 2025 goes straight to paying interest on debt, not building anything, not funding anything, just servicing money that was already spent. The government is now spending more on debt interest than it spends on the entire military. That is not a warning sign. That is the warning sign blaring in your face while everyone pretends the music is still playing. And the thing is, you might look at your portfolio right now and think everything is fine. Your 401k went up 10% this year. Congratulations. Unfortunately, the cost of a home went up 20. The cost of groceries went up 15. So you are technically celebrating losing ground. That is grim, but it is precisely how this transfer works. The nominal number on your screen stays the same or goes up slightly, while the actual purchasing power behind it gets quietly annihilated. Now, most people hear this and think, okay, I will play it safe. Keep my money in a savings account. Hold my government bonds. Trust my pension. That is what responsible people do, and their financial advisor agrees. But here is what the historical record actually shows, and the data on this is genuinely absurd in how consistent it is. In every major currency crisis of the last century, from Weimar Germany in 1923 to Lebanon in 2025, the people who got completely destroyed were not the reckless speculators. They were the careful savers, the ones holding exactly the assets that every advisor calls safe: cash, bonds, fixed income pensions, savings accounts in the local currency. In Lebanon, a nurse saved $50,000 over 10 years in a pound-denominated bank account. In 1975, one Lebanese pound was worth 43 cents. By 2025, one Lebanese pound was worth a fraction of a cent. Her account balance stayed exactly the same. The value behind it dropped 98%. Meanwhile, her colleague at the same hospital who kept savings in physical US dollars outside the banking system preserved 100% of her purchasing power. Same job, same city, same crisis. Completely opposite outcome. The only difference was what they held. And while your advisor is telling you to write it out, the institutions that literally create paper money are doing the exact opposite. Central banks around the world are buying physical gold at a pace not seen since the early 1970s, over 1,000 tons per year for 3 consecutive years. Poland, Turkey, India, Azerbaijan, all buying more gold than China. That has never happened before in the modern financial era. The people who print the money are dumping it for metal. The cognitive dissonance between what they tell you and what they actually do is frankly remarkable. In this video, I am going to break down the specific assets that have survived every single one of these wealth transfers across 4,000 years of recorded history. Not theory, not speculation, financial forensics. And more importantly, I am going to show you exactly how to position yourself using tools available right now from your phone without needing millions of dollars. Because the Cantillon effect does not wait for you to understand it before it takes your purchasing power, and the math on this is already moving. Let us start with the oldest surviving store of value in human history, and then I am going to show you its modern digital successor that every competitor in this space completely ignores: gold. And before your eyes glaze over, this is not about gold bugs or end-of-the-world bunker talk. This is about a mathematical property that no government on Earth can override. Gold is recognizable across every border. It is divisible into small units, and critically, no central bank can print more of it. That is it. That is the entire thesis. When the unit of measurement for everything else is being deliberately diluted, gold holds because its supply cannot be artificially expanded. During the 1970s stagflation, gold dropped nearly 50% mid-decade. Most people panicked and sold. Then from 1976 to 1980, it surged 440%. During the 2008 financial crisis, gold crashed initially when liquidity froze across the entire system. Then it rose 166% in less than 3 years. Silver outperformed it at 448%. Same pattern. Every crisis, the initial panic shakes out impatient holders, and then the metal reprices upward to absorb the purchasing power flooding out of the failing currency. The recommended allocation based on historical data is 10 to 15% of your liquid net worth. Below 5%, and it will not matter when you need it, and it drags your returns during stable periods, and it should be physical bullion, not ETFs, not mining stocks, not collectible coins with inflated premiums, actual metal. Now here is where most gold advice falls completely short, and nobody mentions this. If you buy physical gold in a standard account and sell it at a profit, you are staring at collectibles tax rates up to 28%. That eats your inflation hedge alive. But there is a tool called a self-directed IRA. An SDIRA lets you buy and hold physical gold and silver inside a tax-sheltered retirement account. You get the inflation protection of hard metal and the tax protection of a retirement wrapper. That is how institutional money handles gold, not as a trade, as tax-efficient insurance. But here's the thing. The competitors talking about this topic obsess over 4,000 years of gold history and completely ignore the last 15 years. And what happened in the last 15 years is arguably the most significant development in monetary history since gold itself. Bitcoin. 21 million coins. That is all that will ever exist, mathematically hard-capped, not by a government promise, by code. And in 2024 and 2025, the largest financial institutions on the planet, BlackRock, Fidelity, they did not just acknowledge Bitcoin. They poured tens of billions of dollars into Bitcoin ETFs specifically positioned as inflation hedges. These are the most sophisticated asset managers in human history, and they are treating Bitcoin as digital gold. Now, I am not saying go dump everything into crypto. That would be genuinely unhinged. But ignoring an asset with a fixed supply cap that the biggest institutional money on earth is actively accumulating is the financial equivalent of covering your eyes and pretending the room is not on fire. A small allocation, 5 to 10%, in a regulated Bitcoin ETF gives you exposure to the same scarcity principle as gold, but optimized for a digital, borderless world where moving physical metal across countries is slow, expensive, and increasingly regulated. Gold and Bitcoin together form your insurance bucket. Physical metal for the 4,000-year track record, digital scarcity for the modern financial infrastructure, 10 to 15% combined. But insurance does not generate income. It does not pay you while you wait. And during a prolonged crisis, you need assets that keep producing cash flow even while the currency around them is falling apart. That requires a completely different kind of asset, and the filter for finding the right ones is something most investors have never even considered. During Argentina's repeated currency crises, most businesses got obliterated, input costs exploded, margins collapsed, revenue in the local currency became functionally worthless. But a specific subset of companies did something that looks almost impossible from the outside. They got stronger. Companies producing cooking oil, electricity, medicine, and fuel did not just survive. They raised their prices daily, sometimes hourly, to keep pace with inflation. And their customers had absolutely no choice but to pay, because you cannot stop buying food and electricity no matter what the currency is doing. During Brazil's chronic inflation in the 1980s, which ran at thousands of percent per year, supermarket chains repriced their shelves multiple times per day. Companies that produced essential goods maintained their real profit margins. Companies locked into long-term fixed-price contracts got completely destroyed. The dividing line was not size or sector. It was pricing power, the ability to pass costs through to consumers instantly because those consumers have no alternative. But there is a second filter that almost everyone misses, and it is the difference between nominal survival and actual wealth preservation. A company earning 100% of its revenue in the collapsing local currency sees its real profitability collapse even as its stock price rises in nominal terms. The number goes up, the value does not. But a company exporting 50% of its production receives stable foreign currency directly. Its local costs shrink in real terms. Its dollar revenues hold steady. Real profitability actually improves during the devaluation. For shareholders, that is not just survival. That is a functioning inflation hedge. The specific names to look for are Dividend Aristocrats, companies that have raised their dividends for 25 or more consecutive years through recessions, panics, and crises. Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, Next Era Energy, Duke Energy. Not exciting stocks. They do not trend on social media, but they produce consistent cash flows decade after decade. There is one more asset class that the largest institutions on earth are quietly accumulating right now. Sovereign wealth funds from the Gulf, university endowments in the United States, pension funds from the Netherlands and Canada. For over a decade, these institutions have been net buyers of farmland in politically stable countries. The pace accelerated sharply after 2020. Their investment letters state the logic explicitly. Land produces a commodity that is always in demand. Its supply is genuinely finite. It appreciates in real terms during inflationary periods, and it carries low correlation to equity markets. These are not speculative arguments. They are the same arguments that explain why land has appeared in the portfolios of cautious wealth preservation across every civilization in recorded history. You do not need to buy a 1,000-acre farm. Farmland REITs give you exposure for the price of a single share. Gladstone Land Corporation. Farmland Partners. For broader real estate, Realty Income has 29 consecutive years of dividend growth and pays monthly. The Vanguard Real Estate ETF provides wide diversified exposure. Infrastructure assets, toll roads, pipelines, storage facilities often have contractual rate adjustments tied directly to inflation built into their business models. Revenue rises automatically when prices rise. This is your fortress bucket, 10 to 15% of your portfolio. Hard assets that exist entirely outside the paper financial system.
Now, here is the part that genuinely made me rethink how debt works when I first understood it. And I cannot believe almost nobody in this space explains it. If you currently hold a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, you already own a crisis-proof asset, and you probably do not even know it. A fixed-rate mortgage is effectively a massive short position against the dollar. If inflation runs at 10% but your mortgage rate is locked at 4%, the inflation is mathematically paying down your debt for you. The real value of what you owe shrinks every single year while the physical asset you purchased with that loan, your home, adjusts upward with inflation. In every currency crisis in modern history, people with large fixed-rate debt obligations came out ahead. Not because they were irresponsible, because the math structurally favored them. Debtors win during inflation. That is an immutable fact of monetary mechanics. So you have your 4 layers. Insurance bucket, 10 to 15% in physical gold, via a self-directed IRA plus a small Bitcoin ETF allocation. Fortress bucket, 30 to 40% in Dividend Aristocrat stocks with pricing power and international revenue, plus 10 to 15% in productive real asset. Liquidity bucket, 20 to 25% in short-term Treasury bills, ready to deploy when panic prices appear. But none of this matters if you do not actually do it. In 1936, a watchmaker in Zurich walked into his banker's office and asked to move half his wealth out of German marks. Into gold, into Swiss francs, into a stake in a cousin's farm. His banker, a man he had trusted for 11 years, told him it was an emotional overreaction. Gold pays no dividend. The German economy is recovering. The watchmaker went home without making the transfer. 7 years later, every mark he kept was worth less than the paper it was printed on. He spent the rest of his life knowing the exact moment he had been right and the exact moment he chose not to act. The institutions have a structural incentive to delay acknowledging a crisis because acknowledgement accelerates the collapse. Official signals always lag behind mathematical reality. That gap between what is actually happening and what is officially admitted is not a flaw. It is a feature, and it is specifically designed to keep you calm while the Cantillon Effect quietly moves your purchasing power to someone else. So here is what I want you to do this weekend. Take 15 minutes, pull up your portfolio, run every single position through one test. Can they print more of this? If the answer is yes, and it is not generating income or strategically held for liquidity, mark it for reduction. That is your 15-minute purchasing power audit. Then start building your 3 buckets: insurance, fortress, liquidity. You do not need to do it all at once. Staged over 3 to 6 months is fine, but the direction needs to start now. 4,000 years, the Roman denarius, the French assignat, the Weimar mark, the Argentine peso, the Lebanese pound. Different names, different centuries, different continents, same categories of assets absorbing the wealth that flows out of every collapsing currency. The assets change their names. They never change their nature. The question is not whether you believe a crisis is coming. The question is whether the things you hold right now are the things that have made it through to the other side every single time. Because when the next reset hits, it will not matter what you knew. It will only matter what you held.